The city pulsed with restless energy as dusk settled in. Rain slicked across the streets, transforming the pavement into a glimmering sheet of black glass. Neon signs flickered in the distance, bars, pawn shops, a diner with a buzzing red, open, light. Cars honked impatiently, their headlights slicing through the mist as people hurried along the sidewalks, umbrellas tilted against the drizzle. In the midst of the evening rush, a lone motorcycle growled, its engine deep and commanding. The rider, a broad-shouldered man in his mid-50s, cut through the traffic with practiced ease. His leather jacket gleamed wet under the streetlights, his helmet visor streaked with droplets. This was Mr. Drake. To most of the world, he was untouchable, a billionaire investor whose name carried power in boardrooms across continents. But here, in the rain, astride a machine he still loved despite his wealth, he was simply a man riding home. The traffic lights changed. Cars surged forward. Drake leaned into a turn, his grip steady. And then, it happened. A silver sedan screeched through a red light, its tires hissing on the wet asphalt. Drake swerved hard to avoid it. The motorcycle fishtailed violently, skidding sideways across the slick street. The sound was deafening. Screech of rubber. Shatter of glass. Metal grinding against asphalt. The bike slammed into a lamppost, twisting grotesquely as sparks flew. Drake was hurled forward, crashing onto the pavement with bone-jarring force. His helmet cracked against the curb, rolling away as his head thudded against wet concrete. Gasps erupted from pedestrians. Phones flew out of pockets. Screens lit the scene in shaky frames as dozens began filming. But no one moved. The powerful man lay sprawled on the pavement, rain pouring over him, blood trickling down his temple. His chest heaved in shallow gasps. One arm bent awkwardly beneath him. His bike lay smoking a few feet away, its front wheel mangled, oil pooling on the slick road. For a moment, the city seemed to freeze. Then the noise returned, horns blaring, people shouting, a woman screaming, "Call 911." Drake tried to lift his head. His vision blurred with rain and blood. He groaned, a guttural sound ripped from deep in his chest. His body refused to move. Pain seared down his side like fire. Around him, the crowd thickened. Some whispered. "Is he dead? Look at all that blood. Man, that crash was brutal." Yet still, no one touched him. A man in a suit held up his phone, narrating into the camera, "Yo, this biker just wiped out, crazy crash right in front of me." Another laughed nervously, angling for the best shot. Drake's breaths grew ragged. His fingers twitched against the slick pavement. In the distance, sirens wailed faintly, too far to matter. He tried to form words, but they came out as a broken groan. His mind screamed for help, but his voice failed him. The neon reflections shimmered across the pooling rainwater, glowing red and green against the slick street. Cars slowed, drivers craning their necks for a look before speeding off again. The billionaire, the man whose signature could change the fate of entire corporations, lay helpless, his power stripped away in an instant. Another wave of rain swept over the street, cold and relentless. The crowd shifted back under awnings and umbrellas, murmuring but unmoving. A woman clutched her child tighter, steering him away. A teenager muttered, "Not my problem," and kept walking. The only sound was the hiss of the broken bike, smoke curling from its mangled engine. Drake coughed, blood flecking his lips. His eyes fluttered open, glazed but defiant. He tried again to push himself up, his arm buckled, slamming him back onto the pavement. The pain tore a cry from his throat, echoing into the uncaring night. And still, no one came. The cameras recorded. The whispers spread. But the man bled. Every detail carved itself into the chaos. The blood streaming down into the rainwater. The broken helmet lying cracked in the gutter. The neon diner sign flickering open just yards away, mocking the scene. The billionaire's breath rasping shallow, as if each might be his last. The helplessness was almost unbearable. This wasn't just an accident. It was a test of humanity. Who would act? Who would step forward? Drake's blurred eyes searched the crowd one last time. Dozens of faces, blank, hesitant, lit by the glow of their phones. His lips parted. A broken whisper escaped, barely carried by the rain. "Help, me." The words were almost swallowed by the city's roar. But somewhere, just beyond the crowd, someone heard. The sirens still hadn't reached the block. The rain fell heavier now, hammering the asphalt, mixing blood into thin crimson rivers. Mr. Drake groaned, his hand twitching toward the ruined bike, as though sheer will might piece it back together. His chest rose in shallow, labored gasps. The crowd thickened. And at last, the authorities arrived, but not the ones who could save him. A sleek black SUV rolled up beside the curb, its tinted windows gliding down. Out stepped two men in dark suits, earpieces tucked behind their ears. His security detail. They hurried forward, but instead of rushing to their fallen employer, they stopped short. One of them raised his hand like a barrier, keeping onlookers at bay. "Stay back," he barked at the crowd. "Nobody touch him." The other man knelt down, but his hands hovered uselessly in the air. His voice was tight, nervous. "Sir, hang on. Help is coming." Drake's bloodied lips moved, words scraping out in broken fragments. "Help, now." But the guard didn't move. He glanced around, rain dripping from his brow. Liability. Risk. If they moved him wrong, if they were blamed for worsening his injuries, they'd be finished. A murmur rippled through the crowd. "That's Mr. Drake, right? The billionaire?" "Yeah, I saw him on the cover of Forbes." "Unbelievable, guy worth billions, and look at him now." The chauffeur from the SUV rushed forward with an umbrella, holding it over Drake's prone form as if shielding him from the rain might make a difference. His hands trembled, knuckles white around the handle. Still, no one touched him. The contradiction was stark. The man who had the power to command armies of lawyers, politicians, investors, now lay broken in the street. And those who swore to protect him could only hover helplessly, paralyzed by the fear of doing the wrong thing. The seconds dragged like hours. Drake's breaths grew shallower. His vision blurred at the edges, rain and neon bleeding together. Above him, the suited men exchanged panicked glances. One fumbled for his phone, shouting into it, "Where is the ambulance? He's critical. No, we can't move him." The answer was always the same: "Don't move him, don't touch him, wait." And so they waited. Meanwhile, the crowd grew restless. Dozens of phones hovered in the air, recording every angle. A few whispered prayers. Others scoffed under their breath. "Crazy how no one's helping. Are you kidding? Touch him and you're ruined. Let the professionals handle it." Professionals? He'll be dead before they even arrive. A woman in a business suit wrung her hands, eyes darting toward him. She took a step forward, then froze. Her coworker pulled her back. "Don't. You'll get sued." It was a tableau of paralysis, wealth, authority, and fear locked in place, unwilling to risk themselves even as a man bled in front of them. The irony cut sharper than the rain. The billionaire, who could buy anything with the stroke of a pen, now discovered the one thing money could not purchase in that moment: courage from those around him. Drake's head rolled weakly to the side, eyes glazing, searching the crowd. Dozens of faces stared back, blank, hesitant, lit by the cold glow of screens. His lips parted again. The whisper escaped, hoarse, broken, "Please." The guards flinched at the sound but still didn't touch him. Their eyes darted to the distance, praying for the sound of approaching sirens to draw closer. But all Drake heard was the patter of rain, the hum of neon, and the indifferent murmur of the crowd. He was a man surrounded by power and people, yet utterly alone. And then, movement. From the far edge of the onlookers, someone pushed forward. Not in a suit. Not with an umbrella. Not with authority. A small figure, drenched by the rain, clutching a ragged backpack that sagged at the seams. Her shoes squelched against the pavement as she broke through the circle of onlookers. The crowd scoffed. "Hey, what's she doing? Is that a kid? Somebody stop her before she makes it worse." But the child didn't stop. She dropped her bag on the slick pavement and knelt beside the billionaire, her tiny hands reaching for him as the guards froze in disbelief. In that single moment, the world shifted. The powerful had hesitated. The wealthy had stalled. The helpless child had acted. The crowd buzzed with disbelief as the little girl broke through the circle of bystanders. She was no older than 9, her frame thin beneath a faded hoodie soaked through by the rain. Her shoes were worn, the soles peeling at the edges. A threadbare backpack hung from her shoulders, heavy with things that clinked faintly when she set it down. Her name was Amira. To most of the crowd, she was invisible. A stray child from the streets, someone they had passed a dozen times without noticing. But now, every eye locked on her as she knelt in the puddles beside the fallen man. "Hey, kid, back off," one of the suited guards barked, stepping forward. But Amira didn't move. Her small hands pressed gently against Mr. Drake's side, feeling the shallow rise and fall of his chest. She looked up at the man's pale face streaked with blood, her eyes wide, unflinching. "He's hurt," she said simply, her voice carrying over the murmurs of the crowd. The guard hesitated, caught off guard by the steadiness in her tone. Rain plastered her braids against her forehead, but she kept her gaze on Drake. The crowd erupted with whispers. "What's she doing? She'll kill him if she touches him. Where are her parents?" But Amira was already moving. She pulled the sleeve of her hoodie over her hand, pressing it against the gash at Drake's temple to slow the bleeding. The blood stained her fabric instantly, crimson soaking into the faded blue cotton. The billionaire groaned faintly, his eyelids fluttering. Amira leaned closer, whispering as though he were her only focus in the world. "Don't sleep. You can't sleep now. You're gonna be okay." The guard shifted uncomfortably, torn between dragging her away and admitting she was doing more than he had dared. "You need to step back," he muttered weakly. Amira shot him a look so sharp it silenced him. "He'll bleed out if nobody does anything." Her words sliced through the air, a child scolding adults too afraid to act. The crowd murmured louder, some nodding in reluctant agreement. The rain poured harder, bouncing off the asphalt in shimmering sprays. Drake coughed, his body convulsing weakly. Amira steadied him with her small hands. She tore at the hem of her hoodie with her teeth, ripping free a strip of fabric. With quick fingers, she tied it tightly above his arm, where blood seeped from a deep cut. It wasn't perfect, but it slowed the flow. The crowd gasped. "She knows what she's doing. Where'd she learn that? She's just a kid." Amira ignored them all. Her focus never left Drake. She brushed rain from his face with the back of her hand, leaning close again. "You're not alone," she whispered. "I got you." Drake's lips trembled, a faint sound escaping. "Don't leave." Amira's throat tightened. Memories flashed, her mother's voice, soft but firm. "When others turn away, that's when you step forward. That's what makes us strong." She blinked hard, forcing herself to steady. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." The security men stood frozen, the chauffeur clutching the useless umbrella as if it mattered. The wealthy bystanders, the businessmen, the polished women with their heels lifted off the puddles, all of them stared at the ragged girl kneeling in the rain, saving the man none of them dared touch. It was a picture of pure contradiction. A billionaire broken on the ground. Guards afraid to move. Cameras raised to film. And a homeless child, her hoodie soaked in blood and rain, doing what no one else would. The murmurs grew heavier, angrier now, not at her, but at the shame the adults felt. She's braver than all of us. God help us, a child had to step up. Amira reached for Drake's phone, lying half submerged in a puddle, the screen cracked. She pressed the button, tried to unlock it, denied. She shook her head, biting her lip. I can't get it open, she muttered. Still, she kept trying, fingers fumbling against the wet glass. Drake groaned, his chest shuddering. Stay with me, Amira urged, pressing the phone against his hand. Maybe your thumb will open it. The billionaire's trembling finger brushed the glass, but his strength faltered. The phone slid back into the puddle. Amira snatched it up again, refusing to give in. The guard finally muttered, half in awe, she's keeping him alive. The woman in the business suit who had hesitated earlier now clutched her chest, tears in her eyes. God, look at her. She's just a baby. But Amira didn't care what they thought. She leaned over Drake again, whispering into the storm. Hold on. Please. You don't give up now. I'm not letting you. For a moment, the city faded away. It was just her and him, the underdog child and the fallen giant. And in that silence, something shifted in the crowd. They saw it too. The poorest among them had become the bravest. The storm worsened, hammering the pavement in sharp, cold sheets. Neon lights blurred against the rain, flickering red and blue across puddles that widened into shallow rivers. Amira pressed harder against the wound at Mr. Drake's side, her sleeve soaked with blood. Her arms ached, but she refused to stop. His breaths were shallow, uneven, his lips pale in the glow of the streetlights. The crowd wavered around them. Some had put away their phones, shame etched into their faces, but still, no one moved to help. The suited guards hovered nearby, their eyes darting nervously toward the flashing lights of stalled traffic. Ambulance is still miles out, one muttered into his earpiece. Gridlock. They can't push through. Amira's jaw tightened. She looked at Drake, whispering, we're not waiting. You're staying alive now. She ripped the lace from one of her sneakers, tying it clumsily but firmly above his bleeding leg. Her fingers slipped on the wet cord, but she tugged it tighter, making him wince with a groan. Sorry, she whispered quickly. I know it hurts. But it's better than bleeding. The chauffeur stepped forward, shaking his head. Little girl, you'll hurt him. Amira glared up, rain streaking her face. He'll die if we don't do something. The man fell silent, shame coloring his cheeks. A man in the crowd shouted, get her away from him. She's just making a mess. Another echoed, yeah, what does a kid know about saving anyone? The murmurs swelled, threatening to pull her back into obscurity, but Amira kept her body between them and Drake, shielding him with her small frame. Her voice shook, but she shouted back, at least I'm trying. The silence that followed was louder than the rain. Suddenly, a taxi swerved too close to the wreckage, tires spraying dirty water across the street. The puddle splashed over them, soaking Drake's face and nearly knocking Amira off balance. Watch it, someone yelled, waving their arms. The car honked, speeding past. Amira wiped water from Drake's mouth with her sleeve, panicked. He coughed weakly, sputtering against the sudden rush. She leaned closer, whispering, I got you. I won't let them drown you here. Her hands trembled, but she steadied them on his chest, counting his shallow breaths. Amira grabbed Drake's phone again, wiping rain from the cracked screen. She pressed the button, no response. Dead. Her stomach twisted. She looked around desperately. Dozens of phones glowed in the crowd. Call the hospital, she shouted. Call anyone. No one moved. She stood suddenly, pointing at a man with his phone raised. You. Call for help, not a video. He froze, ashamed. Then, finally, he lowered his camera, dialing shakily. Others followed suit, murmuring into their phones, eyes darting toward her with guilt. For the first time, the crowd obeyed her. Drake stirred faintly, his eyes fluttering open. His lips moved, voice a broken rasp. "Leave me." Amira's heart clenched. "No. No, I'm not leaving you." "You can't." His eyes rolled back, his breath rattled. Amira pressed her forehead to his chest, whispering fiercely, "Don't say that. Don't you give up on me. Not after I came this far." Her own fear threatened to break her, but she clenched her fists, holding on. She remembered her mother's voice again. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to act anyway. She raised her head, meeting his glazed eyes. "I choose to act. For you." A piece of the bike shifted, its frame screeching as it settled against the pavement. A jagged edge of metal slid dangerously close to Drake's chest. Gasps erupted. "It's gonna crush him." Amira threw herself against the twisted bike, straining with all her strength. The metal screeched but didn't budge. Her arms shook violently, her knees buckling. For a moment, it seemed impossible. And then, two bystanders stepped forward. "Here, kid, let us." Together, they lifted the heavy frame just enough to push it aside. Amira gasped, collapsing back to Drake's side. She pressed her hand against his chest again, whispering, "See. You're still here. You're not done yet." The sirens grew louder now, faint but approaching. The crowd looked up, murmuring with relief. But Amira didn't move her eyes from Drake. She brushed wet strands of hair from her forehead, her voice soft but steady. "Stay with me. Just a little longer." Drake's hand twitched weakly, brushing against hers. The faintest sign of life. Amira smiled through the rain. "That's it. You're fighting. And I'm fighting with you." The guards exchanged stunned looks, the chauffeur lowering his umbrella completely now, ashamed to stand above her. The smallest person there had become the only true protector. The ambulance lights finally glowed at the far end of the street, red and white cutting through the storm. The crowd sighed with relief. But as Amira looked down at Drake's pale face, she knew it wasn't over yet. Because the real fight, keeping him alive until those medics reached them, was still in her hands. And she wasn't letting go. The wail of the ambulance grew louder, bouncing off wet buildings, cutting through the storm. Red and white lights finally pierced the gloom, splashing across the street in chaotic flashes. The crowd parted at last, some stepping back in relief, others still holding their phones high. Amira tightened her grip on Drake's bloodied arm. His chest still rose and fell in shallow bursts, but the rhythm was erratic, fragile. "They're here," she whispered, her voice trembling but steady. "See? I told you. You just had to hold on." The ambulance screeched to a stop. Doors flew open. Two paramedics jumped out, lugging equipment toward the scene. Their boots splashed through puddles as they cut past the circle of onlookers. "Male, late 50s, unconscious, severe trauma," one of the guards barked, finding his voice now that professionals had arrived. The medics dropped to their knees beside Drake, snapping on gloves. One pulled out scissors, slicing away the soaked leather jacket to expose his injuries. The other clipped monitors to his chest, wires tangling briefly in the rain. "BP's crashing," the medic muttered. "We need to stabilize him here before we move." Amira shuffled back an inch, water dripping from her sleeves, but her eyes never left Drake's face. The medic glanced at her. "You with him?" Amira shook her head quickly. "No. He crashed. I helped him breathe." The paramedic paused, scanning her blood-streaked hands, the torn shoelace tied around his leg, the strip of hoodie pressed against his temple. His brow furrowed. "You did this?" Amira nodded silently. The medic exhaled sharply. You bought him time. Without this, he'd already be gone. The words rippled through the crowd. Murmurs rose, stunned, ashamed, awed. That little girl. She really saved him. God, she's braver than any of us. The guards exchanged a glance, guilt flashing across their faces. Amira's chest swelled with relief. She hadn't been sure. She'd only done what she could, but to hear it had worked, to know Drake had a chance, it lit a fragile flame of hope in her heart. The medics moved fast, strapping him onto a gurney. Oxygen mask secured, four inserted. One lifted his head carefully, checking pupils with a penlight. Drake groaned faintly, his eyelids fluttering open for a second. His gaze drifted, unfocused, until it landed on Amira's small face hovering near the stretcher. His lips parted, forming the faintest whisper. You. Amira leaned closer, clutching the edge of the gurney. It's okay. You're safe now. They've got you. The medic tapped her shoulder gently. We need space, kid. She hesitated, then stepped back, watching as they wheeled him quickly toward the ambulance. The chauffeur rushed forward, umbrella still useless, trying to climb in after them. The guards followed, barking into radios, their authority returned now that someone else bore the responsibility. The gurney slid into the back of the ambulance. One medic climbed in, shouting vitals. The other swung the doors shut, but not before pausing to glance at Amira once more. Good work, kid, he said firmly. You gave him a chance. The doors slammed. The siren wailed. The ambulance roared into the night, lights flashing until it disappeared down the slick road. The crowd remained, stunned into silence. A woman whispered, that girl, she's a hero. Another added, and we all just stood there. Amira stood alone in the rain, her hoodie drenched, her hands stained crimson. Her chest heaved, exhaustion finally catching up. She looked down at the puddles swirling red around her shoes, then back at the street where the ambulance had vanished. She didn't feel like a hero. She felt like a child who had refused to let someone die. The storm quieted to a drizzle. Neon flickered. The crowd slowly dispersed, leaving only whispers in the air. For a fleeting moment, relief washed over her. She had saved him. But as she reached for her backpack, she noticed shadows shifting in the edges of the crowd. Eyes on her. And with them, whispers not of praise, but suspicion. Did you see her hands in his pockets? She grabbed his phone, didn't she? Homeless kid like that, you think she's here out of kindness? The relief drained from her chest, replaced by a new, sharper dread. She had just saved a man's life. But now, they were turning on her. The rain had slowed to a thin drizzle, leaving the air damp and heavy. The crowd still lingered, scattered along the sidewalks, whispering about the crash. Neon lights flickered over the wet asphalt, painting shifting patterns across puddles stained faintly red. Amira bent to pick up her ragged backpack. Her hands trembled from exhaustion, her hoodie soaked and stiff with blood. For a moment, she let herself breathe. She had done it. Against everything, she had kept him alive. But relief lasted only seconds. Hey, a sharp voice cut through the murmur of the crowd. Amira turned. A tall woman in a pristine designer coat was striding toward her, heels clicking against the wet pavement. Her black umbrella tilted neatly over her head, not a drop on her. Her presence commanded instant attention. This was Lydia Drake, the billionaire's younger sister. Known for her icy beauty, sharper tongue, and carefully polished image. She had arrived late, but her timing was perfect to seize control of the narrative. She stopped just short of Amira, eyes narrowing at the sight of the little girl crouched on the ground, backpack slung over one shoulder. What do we have here? Lydia's voice was smooth, but laced with disdain. The crowd hushed, waiting. Amira straightened, clutching the strap of her backpack. He crashed. I helped him. Lydia tilted her head, lips curling into a cold smile. Helped him? Or helped yourself? Her eyes flicked to Amira's bloody hands, then to the billionaire's cracked phone, still lying in the puddle nearby. Funny, isn't it? A homeless child hovering over an unconscious man, with her hands in his pockets. Gasps rippled through the onlookers. Amira's stomach dropped. No. I wasn't. She was saving him, someone protested from the crowd. She tied his wounds, she kept him alive. But Lydia's voice cut sharper than rain against glass. And yet. I saw her with his phone. Isn't that convenient? Whispers surged again, suspicion curling through the crowd like smoke. I did see her pick up the phone. Maybe she was going to run off with it. You know how these street kids are. Amira's heart pounded. She looked desperately at the faces around her, the same faces that had praised her moments ago. Now their eyes narrowed, doubt creeping in. Her throat tightened. I wasn't stealing. I was trying to call for help. The phone was locked, he dropped it, I tried to use it. But her words were drowned by Lydia's icy sneer. How convenient. The billionaire lies bleeding, and you just happen to be the first one with your hands on his valuables. A hospital security guard stepped forward, frowning. What's going on here? Lydia wasted no time. This child interfered with my brother's medical care. She touched him, tied things around him, and tried to steal his phone. You need to remove her immediately. Amira's chest seized with panic. She stumbled back as the guard approached, his hand reaching for her shoulder. Wait, no. I wasn't stealing, I was saving him. Ask the medics. Ask anyone. But doubt was a powerful poison. The whispers had already stained the truth. Better safe than sorry. She shouldn't have touched him. She's just a kid, what does she know about saving lives? Tears burned at the corners of Amira's eyes. She had fought through fear, through rain, through the scorn of the crowd to keep him alive, and now, they painted her as a criminal. The guard took her arm gently but firmly. Come on, miss. We need to talk. Amira yanked against his grip, her voice cracking. Please. I wasn't trying to hurt him. I swear. But Lydia's gaze stayed cold, satisfied. She turned to the crowd, her voice ringing with authority. Let this be a lesson. Not everyone who looks like a hero is one. Some people will take advantage of tragedy. Even children. The words stung sharper than knives. The crowd shifted uneasily, shame and doubt colliding. Some looked away. Others nodded slowly, their fear of being tricked outweighing the truth they had seen with their own eyes. Amira's tears spilled at last, streaking down her soot-stained cheeks. She looked toward the street where the ambulance had disappeared. He knows, she whispered desperately. He knows I tried to help. But the sirens were long gone, and the only voices now were those who doubted her. The guard led her toward the hospital entrance, murmuring something about questioning, about safety. Behind her, Lydia smoothed her coat, her eyes glinting. She had turned the savior into the suspect with a single accusation. And Amira, the girl who had risked everything, now felt smaller than ever, her victory stolen, her heart heavy with injustice. The last thing she heard before the hospital doors closed behind her was the crowd's fractured verdict. Maybe she saved him. Or maybe she just wanted something in return. The fluorescent lights of the hospital hallway buzzed faintly overhead. The scent of antiseptic clung to the air, sharp and sterile. Amira sat hunched in a plastic chair outside a small office, her ragged backpack resting in her lap. The guard who had brought her in stood nearby, arms crossed, his expression stern but not cruel. He hadn't spoken much since they entered, only told her to wait. Amira stared at the scuffed tiles, her small hands gripping the straps of her bag so tightly her knuckles whitened. Her sleeves were still soaked with blood, crimson stains dried stiff against the faded blue fabric. She rubbed at them absent-mindedly, but the stains only smeared darker. The door opened. A woman in a gray cardigan stepped out, holding a clipboard. She had kind eyes behind her glasses, though her voice was firm. "Amira, is it?" Amira nodded faintly. "I'm Mrs. Green, a social worker here at the hospital. They asked me to speak with you while they sort things out." She gestured gently toward the office. "Come inside, sweetheart." Amira hesitated, hugging her backpack closer. But when the guard gave a small nod, she rose slowly and followed the woman into the room. The office was small, cluttered with files and papers stacked high. A mug of tea cooled on the desk. Mrs. Green motioned for Amira to sit. "You've had quite a night," she said softly, easing into her chair. "I've heard a lot of different stories about what happened out there. But I want to hear it from you. In your words." Amira's lips pressed together. Her throat burned with the weight of everything, the crash, the blood, Lydia's cold accusation. For a moment, she thought about staying silent. But Mrs. Green's eyes were steady, patient. So Amira spoke. "I didn't steal anything," she whispered first, the words tumbling out too fast. "I swear. I only picked up his phone to try and call for help. But it was locked. I couldn't." Her voice cracked, and she blinked hard. Mrs. Green leaned forward, her tone gentle. "I believe you. But I want to know more about you, Amira. Where did you learn how to do what you did for him? The tourniquet, the pressure, those aren't things most kids know." Amira's gaze dropped to her lap. Her fingers traced the frayed strap of her backpack. Slowly, haltingly, she began. "My mom taught me," she murmured. "She said, when bad things happen, you can't just watch. You have to try. Even if you're scared." Her voice trembled, but the words kept coming, spilling like water over cracked stone. "She worked in a clinic once." Before, Amira paused, her chest tightening. She hugged the backpack tighter. "Before the fire." Mrs. Green's brow furrowed. "The fire?" Amira nodded slowly, her eyes glassy. "Our apartment burned down 2 years ago. My mom woke me up, smoke everywhere, couldn't see, couldn't breathe. She pushed me toward the door, told me to run. But Amira's voice broke. Her small shoulders shook. She didn't make it out." The room fell silent except for the soft buzz of the overhead light. Amira wiped her nose with the back of her sleeve, smearing soot and blood. "After that, I didn't have anywhere to go. Nobody. I just kept moving. Sleeping where I could. Carrying what little I have left." She tapped her backpack, eyes downcast. "This is all I've got. A blanket. A teddy. Some cans of food when I can find them." Her fingers slipped inside, pulling out a worn stuffed bear with one eye missing. She set it gently on her lap, smoothing its fur as if it were priceless. Mrs. Green's throat tightened as she watched. "I see my mom sometimes," Amira whispered. "Not really, but, in dreams. She tells me not to be afraid. To do the right thing, even if no one else does. That's why, when I saw him on the ground, bleeding, and everyone just watching," her voice hardened suddenly, surprising even herself. "I couldn't just stand there. She wouldn't let me." Her eyes shone with defiance through her tears. "I didn't care if they yelled. I didn't care if they laughed. I had to try." Mrs. Green sat back slowly, her eyes wet behind her glasses. She scribbled something on her notepad, then looked up again. "Amira, you're one of the bravest children I've ever met." Amira shook her head quickly, almost angrily. "I'm not brave. I was scared the whole time. I thought he was gonna die, and I couldn't stop it. That, Mrs. Green said softly, is what courage really is. Acting even though you're scared. For the first time that night, Amira let herself cry openly. Silent, shuddering sobs that shook her thin frame. She clutched the teddy tighter, pressing her face into its worn fur. Mrs. Green reached across the desk, placing a hand gently over Amira's small ones. You did more than most adults could have. Don't let anyone take that truth from you. The words seeped into Amira's chest like warmth through ice. For a moment, the weight of suspicion, the sting of Lydia's accusation, lessened. But doubt still gnawed at the edges of her mind. The man she had saved was gone, whisked away in an ambulance. She didn't know if he lived. She didn't know if anyone would believe her story. And somewhere deep inside, fear whispered, what if they decide I don't belong here? What if they throw me back into the streets? She hugged her teddy tighter, whispering so quietly Mrs. Green almost didn't hear, I just wanted him to be safe. The hospital room was dim, the only light coming from a monitor glowing faint green beside the bed. Machines beeped steadily, measuring each fragile beat of Mr. Drake's heart. His face was pale, lined with exhaustion and pain. Bandages wrapped his arm, his side, and his head. Tubes and wires connected him to machines humming softly in the background. For hours he had lain silent, unconscious. Doctors moved in and out, adjusting fluids, whispering to each other in clinical tones. Lydia had claimed the leather chair at his bedside, legs crossed neatly, her coat folded on her lap. She held her phone in one hand, furiously typing, her perfectly manicured nails clicking against the glass. The door opened quietly. Mrs. Green, the social worker, stepped in. She nodded politely at Lydia. How is he? Lydia sighed dramatically. Stable. Barely. He was lucky the ambulance got there in time. Such a shame he was left lying on the street for so long. Mrs. Green's brows furrowed. He wasn't left. A girl. Oh yes, Lydia interrupted smoothly, waving a dismissive hand. The little street rat. Touching him, rummaging through his things. I made sure the hospital staff knew about her. Can't be too careful with people like that. Mrs. Green's jaw tightened. She saved him. Without her, he wouldn't be here. Lydia's eyes glinted coldly. We'll see. For now, I'd rather she stays far away from my brother. The tension hung thick in the air. And then, a groan. Both women froze. Mr. Drake's fingers twitched against the sheets. His eyelids fluttered open, pupils adjusting to the dim light. The beeping monitor quickened as his chest rose more sharply. Arthur. Lydia jumped to her feet, leaning close, plastering on a mask of relief. Oh, thank God. You're awake. He blinked slowly, groggy but aware. His lips parted, his voice a rasp. Where am I? In the hospital, she said quickly. You're safe now. Rest. His eyes flicked past her, scanning the room. They landed on Mrs. Green, then the doorway beyond. Confusion furrowed his brow. The girl. Lydia stiffened. What girl? Drake's voice grew stronger, though faint. The little one. She was there. Kept me awake. Stopped the bleeding. He turned his head slightly, wincing at the movement. His eyes locked on Lydia's. Where is she? Lydia forced a smile, smooth as glass. Arthur, you were disoriented. There was no child. Just chaos and strangers. You must have imagined it. Mrs. Green stepped forward firmly. He didn't imagine it. Amira was there. She saved your life. Relief flickered across Drake's pale face. Amira, the name left his lips like a prayer. Find her. Lydia's jaw tightened. Arthur, really, there's no need. Find her. His voice cracked like thunder despite the weakness in his body. The machines beeped faster, his pulse surging. Mrs. Green glanced at Lydia, then back to Drake. "She's here in the hospital. I've been speaking with her." "Bring her to me," Drake rasped. Lydia stepped sharply between them. "Absolutely not. She's a liability. Do you realize the hospital had to clean him up after she put her dirty hands all over his wounds?" Mrs. Green's voice rose, steady and fierce. "Dirty hands that kept him alive long enough for your ambulance to arrive." The two women stared each other down, the billionaire's shallow breaths the only sound between them. Finally, he coughed weakly, forcing out the words, "Please. Bring the girl." Mrs. Green nodded quickly, slipping from the room before Lydia could protest. She sat curled on the cot in a small holding room, her teddy bear clutched to her chest. The blood on her hoodie had dried, dark patches against the faded fabric. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her body sagging with exhaustion. The door opened. Mrs. Green entered, her face gentler now. "Amira, he's awake. He's asking for you." Amira blinked, stunned. He remembers me." Mrs. Green smiled softly. "Not only remembers. He wants to see you." For the first time that night, hope flickered in Amira's chest. She rose slowly, clutching her teddy tighter. Lydia stood stiffly by the window when the door opened again. Her eyes narrowed as Mrs. Green guided Amira inside. The billionaire's eyes opened, weary but focused. And when they landed on the little girl, a faint smile tugged at his lips. "There you are," he whispered hoarsely. Amira froze, suddenly shy under the weight of his gaze. She stepped closer, clutching her teddy. I tried to help. I didn't want you to die." His eyes softened, wet with unspoken gratitude. "You didn't just try, child. You did. I'm here because of you." Lydia's composure cracked. "Arthur, you can't honestly believe." "Enough, Lydia." His voice, though weak, carried steel. He looked back at Amira, ignoring his sister's protests. "You were braver than anyone else out there. I owe you my life." Amira's lip trembled. For the first time since the crash, she felt seen, not as a suspect, not as a street child, but as what she had truly been, a savior. Drake reached a trembling hand toward her. She stepped closer, placing her tiny fingers gently in his. His palm was rough, but his grip was warm. "Promise me," he whispered. "You won't let their lies make you doubt who you are." Amira nodded fiercely, tears brimming in her eyes. "I promise." Behind them, Lydia's smile hardened into something colder, sharper. She smoothed her coat, her eyes glinting as she watched the bond forming before her. If her brother chose to see this child as a hero, she would need another way to turn the tide. And in that moment, a new game began. The hospital corridors had quieted for the night. The rain had stopped outside, leaving streaks across the tall glass windows. A hush lingered, broken only by the distant beeps of monitors and the shuffle of nurses' shoes. Amira sat in a chair beside Mr. Drake's bed. His breathing was steadier now, the monitors humming with a more regular rhythm. She clutched her teddy bear in her lap, her head bobbing with exhaustion but refusing to leave him. Every time she considered closing her eyes, she remembered his words, "You saved me." But not everyone in the hospital felt relief. At the far end of the hallway, Lydia stood in the shadows, her phone pressed to her ear. Her voice was low, cold, laced with venom. "Yes. He's awake. And he's obsessed with that girl." A pause. "No, I couldn't sway him. He won't listen to me. He thinks she's some kind of miracle." Her lips curled into a sneer. "Then we'll make her disappear. Quietly. Tonight." She slipped the phone into her coat pocket, smoothing the fabric over her polished frame. Her heels clicked softly against the tiles as she turned, her expression composed once more. Anyone passing by would think she was simply a concerned sister. But in her eyes flickered a darkness sharper than any storm. Drake stirred awake, his eyes heavy but aware. He turned his head toward Amira, who sat alert now, watching him. "You should rest," he murmured. Amira shook her head. "I don't want you to wake up alone." A faint smile touched his lips. "You remind me of someone I knew long ago." His gaze softened, but before he could continue, the door opened. Lydia swept in, her perfume filling the sterile room. Her smile was warm, but her eyes were anything but. "Arthur," she said sweetly, "you should be resting. And the child should be elsewhere. Hospitals aren't playgrounds." Amira stiffened in her chair, clutching the teddy tighter. Drake's voice rasped. "She stays." Lydia's smile twitched, but she recovered quickly. "Of course. If that's what you want. But really, she must be exhausted. Perhaps I'll take her to the waiting lounge so you can get proper rest." "I said she stays." This time, his voice carried iron. Lydia's eyes flickered with suppressed rage, but she dipped her head politely. "Very well. As you wish, brother." She turned to leave, but her gaze lingered on Amira, cold and unspoken. "You won't be here long." The hallway outside the room was darker now, the overhead lights dimmed for the late hour. Nurses moved quietly, their voices hushed. Amira had finally dozed off, her head resting against the side of the bed, her small hand still curled around Drake's. Footsteps echoed softly down the hall. A man in orderly scrubs approached, his face partly hidden under a cap. He pushed a mop bucket, blending in easily. But his eyes were sharp, focused on the room at the end of the corridor. He paused outside, glancing both ways. Then, setting the mop aside, he reached into his pocket. A glint of metal flashed briefly in the dim light, a syringe, its contents clear and lethal. Inside the room, Drake stirred uneasily, as if sensing something. The door creaked open. The orderly slipped in, moving silently. His gaze landed first on the sleeping child, then on the weakened billionaire. He stepped closer to the bed, syringe ready. But just as he leaned in, a voice cut through the stillness. "Hey! You're not supposed to be in here." Mrs. Green stood in the doorway, holding a folder of papers. Her eyes narrowed instantly. "What are you doing?" The man froze, then spun toward her, mask slipping. His hand darted into his coat, but Drake's weak voice rasped out, hoarse but loud enough to pierce the silence. "Guards!" Chaos erupted. 2 hospital security officers rushed in from down the hall, alerted by the shout. The man bolted for the door, but they tackled him hard against the wall, the syringe clattering to the floor. Amira jolted awake, eyes wide with terror as she saw the struggle. "What's happening?" she cried, clutching her teddy bear. The officers dragged the would-be attacker down the hall, his curses echoing until he was out of sight. Drake's chest heaved, sweat on his brow. He looked at Lydia, who had appeared in the doorway seconds after the chaos ended, her expression perfectly schooled into shock. What on earth was that?" she stammered. Drake's gaze pierced her, colder than she'd ever seen. "You tell me." For the first time, her mask slipped, just for an instant. A flicker of guilt, a crack of fear. Then the smile returned, brittle but intact. "How dare you suggest I had anything to do with this?" she snapped. "I love you, Arthur." But his eyes didn't leave hers. And in that silence, a truth settled between them, he no longer believed her. Amira sat trembling, her tiny hand gripping Drake's tightly. Mrs. Green crouched beside her, whispering reassurance. But Drake's gaze stayed fixed on Lydia, his once trusted sister now a shadow in the doorway. The betrayal was no longer suspicion. It was real. And for the first time, Lydia realized her brother would not be so easily deceived. Which meant, she would have to try harder. The storm outside had long passed, leaving the city wrapped in damp silence. The hospital glowed against the night, a beacon of steel and glass. Inside, the tension had only sharpened. Amira sat curled in the chair again, her small body wrapped in the hospital blanket Mrs. Green had found for her. But despite the warmth, she shivered. The attempt on Mr. Drake's life still replayed in her head, the man with the syringe, the struggle, the fear. She hugged her teddy tighter, whispering into its worn fur. I don't want him to die. I don't want to lose someone again. Across the room, Mr. Drake stirred. His breathing was steadier, his color returning faintly. He turned his head, his eyes finding the little girl watching him with wide, haunted eyes. You're safe here, he rasped. Her lip trembled. Am I? They tried to hurt you. And maybe me too. He winced, shifting slightly. Yes. They did. But they didn't succeed. Because you were here. Because you stayed. Tears filled Amira's eyes. But I'm just a kid. I'm nobody. Everyone said I was stealing. Everyone thought I was lying. What if they're right? His hand lifted weakly, reaching toward her. She scrambled to his side, slipping her small hand into his. His grip was faint, but steady. Listen to me, he whispered fiercely, his eyes sharp despite his frailty. You are not nobody. You are the reason I am breathing right now. You are braver than men twice your size, richer than kings. You saw me, when no one else would. That makes you everything. Her tears spilled, silent streams down her cheeks. She pressed her forehead gently to his hand, whispering, I just didn't want you to be alone. You saved my world, he said, his voice breaking. And I will never let you be alone again. The door banged open. A nurse rushed in, her face pale. We need to move him, now. There's been another breach. Amira froze. Another what? Before anyone could answer, the lights flickered violently. For a moment, the entire ward plunged into darkness. Shouts echoed from down the hall. A crash, the sound of running feet. Somewhere, glass shattered. Drake tried to push himself upright, but his body betrayed him. He groaned, clutching his side. Stay down. Mrs. Green ordered, rushing to his bed. Amira's heart raced. The shadows in the hallway seemed alive, shapes moving where there should be none. The earlier attacker hadn't been acting alone. Someone else was still out there. Then, a figure lunged through the doorway. Amira screamed. The man's face was half hidden under a hood, but the glint of a knife was clear in his hand. He rushed toward the bed, toward Mr. Drake. Amira didn't think. She didn't hesitate. She threw herself between the attacker and the man she had saved, her arms spread wide. No, she cried. The knife slashed across her arm as she collided with the man, her small body knocking against his legs. Pain seared through her, white-hot, but she clung to his coat with all her strength, screaming at the top of her lungs. Help! He's here! Guards burst into the room seconds later, tackling the intruder to the floor. The knife clattered away. The struggle was brief, violent, then over. The man was dragged out, his curses echoing in the hall. But Amira collapsed to the floor, clutching her bleeding arm. Amira! Drake's voice cracked, raw with terror. Mrs. Green dropped to her knees beside the child, pressing cloth against the wound. She's bleeding. We need a doctor. Amira's breaths came in short, sharp gasps. The world blurred around her. But through the haze, she felt a strong hand clutch hers, Drake's. His voice shook with fury and desperation. Stay with me. Don't you dare leave me. Not you. Her lips trembled, her voice a whisper. It hurts. I know, little one. I know. His tears fell freely now, streaking his pale face. But you are stronger than pain. Stronger than fear. You've carried yourself through fire before, and you'll carry yourself through this. Her eyes fluttered. She looked at him weakly. Promise? Promise, he said fiercely. On my life, on everything I own, I will keep you safe. I will never let you go. The doctors rushed in then, lifting her carefully, bandaging her arm. But even as they carried her to another room, her tiny hand refused to release his. It took 3 nurses to gently pry their fingers apart. Drake lay back against the pillows, broken but burning with resolve. He had nearly lost her, and it had shown him a truth clearer than any fortune, sharper than any betrayal. That girl was no stray. No thief. She was his savior. His protector. His family now. And he would protect her with every ounce of power left in him. Later, as Amira lay in the next room, her arm bandaged, her teddy tucked safely at her side, Drake insisted on being wheeled in despite his own injuries. He reached for her small hand again, their fingers intertwining. You are not alone anymore, he whispered. Amira's eyes filled with tears, but this time, they were tears of relief. She smiled faintly, whispering back, and neither are you. The hospital had settled into a fragile calm. The chaos of the night, the crash, the accusations, the betrayal, the attacks, now lingered only as echoes in the sterile halls. Nurses moved quietly. The steady beeping of monitors filled the silence. In a private recovery room, Amira lay curled under crisp white sheets. Her bandaged arm rested gently across her chest, her teddy bear tucked safely beside her. Exhaustion weighed on her, but for the first time in years, she felt something like peace. She wasn't huddled under a bridge or in a doorway. She wasn't invisible. She was safe. And someone was watching over her. Mr. Drake sat in a wheelchair beside her bed, refusing to be moved despite the doctor's protests. His injuries were still severe, but his gaze never left the little girl. In the soft glow of the lamp, his eyes carried a weight far deeper than pain. You saved me twice, he whispered, though Amira was already drifting to sleep. And I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never face the world alone again. Mrs. Green stood by the door, her arms crossed gently, a faint smile on her lips. For all the tragedy she had witnessed in her career, moments like this, when broken people found each other, were rare. She said quietly, she doesn't know it yet, but her life has changed forever. Drake nodded slowly, his hand resting lightly on Amira's blanket. So has mine. For a while, silence reigned. The storm had passed, leaving behind only the soft hum of machines and the steady breathing of a child who had carried the courage of giants. Far from the recovery ward, in a corner suite reserved for VIP families, Lydia Drake stood at the window. The city stretched below her, alive with neon and noise, but her eyes were cold, focused inward. Her reflection in the glass stared back, perfect makeup, perfect composure. To anyone else, she was the picture of concern and loyalty. But her hand tightened around her phone until her knuckles whitened. The failed attempt gnawed at her pride. First the syringe, then the knife. Both had been thwarted. And worse, her brother, once pliable and blind, now looked at her with suspicion sharp enough to cut. Her lips curled into a bitter smile. So be it, she murmured to herself. If the little stray wants to play hero, let her. But no one, no child, steals what is mine. She tapped a message into her phone, her words crisp, calculated. The girl stays close to him. If I can't remove her in the dark, I'll destroy her in the light. Prepare everything. A reply flashed seconds later, understood. Lydia slid the phone into her coat pocket, smoothing the fabric over her polished figure. She turned from the window, her heels clicking softly across the marble floor. The storm outside might have ended, but a new one was already brewing. The little girl stirred, half awake. Her eyes fluttered open, catching the silhouette of Drake still sitting beside her bed. You're still here, she whispered. Always, he answered simply. Her eyes closed again, comforted. But even as sleep reclaimed her, the faint unease of earlier lingered, like a shadow pressing against the edge of her dreams. The camera pulls back slowly. A child sleeping in peace for the first time in years. A billionaire keeping vigil, silently vowing protection. And far away, in the same hospital, a sister plotting her next move. The story closes on a whisper of dread, a reminder that though the night's battle is over, the war for Amira's future has only just begun.